folk of Alexander, and some of Hercules, of Hector and Lysander, and such great names as these. But of all...
Welcome to this battlemech lecture. Today we are going to be covering the Firestarter, which is a great machine if you like to commit a few war crimes every once in a while, due to its primary role as an incendiary mech. It is also the primary and probably one of the only incendiary mech you're going to see in the inner sphere and beyond, to be honest. It is a mech that has been serving in its primary role since its inception, and it's one of those things that you're probably going to have shot at a few times in the past, or maybe you're the one that has been shooting out of it, as it has been used by just about every military in the general human-controlled space over now close to 500 years. So let's talk real quick about incendiary mechs. The Firestarter has been defined as the primary fire mech since its inception, while other mechs are equipped with flamers like the Warhammer L from House Liao or the Puma Omnimech. The Firestarter is really the only production model incendiary mech that you have just about anywhere. Really, nobody has tried to supplant it outside of evolutions of the original model. What is the basic role of an incendiary mech or an incendiary weapon? Well, technically, the basic role is brush clearing buildings that need to be taken out. Those are the, let's say, nice things you can do with incendiary mechs. But let's face it, in the current era, well, let's say since the Age of War, infantry clearing and committing war crimes 35 tons at a time has been what those incendiary mechs have been mostly known for. You can also use them to remind rioters that they need to pay their taxes, and that's what the other incendiary mechs that came into being and disappeared were originally meant to do. The original Blackjack also had a role as an incendiary mech. I'm not quite sure why the Star League would have purchased weapons like these in the end, because the Star League was trying to be nice to people, especially under General Kerensky trying to bring the periphery under a more respectable leadership. The poster child for war crime, being Stefan Amaris, also had a group of Whitworth, which were equipped with SRM Inferno missiles and flamers as part of his Terra force. Maybe this would have caught on if the crazy bastard had stuck around, but I think the Whitworth is too slow to be a very effective incendiary mech. There is a reason why the Firestarter is a little bit more reliable in that role, because you need to be able to, run away from the fires you set when you're in an incendiary mech. So really, what is a Firestarter? So Argyle Technology in 2550 basically built the FS9 series Firestarters as a 35 tons flamer platform. It's 100% dedicated as a fire mech. Because of that, it packs quite a few flamers, even though the arm assemblies for those flamers is not the best one on the market. You do have to be careful and have an engineer look them over if you don't want it to cause some issues, and that's not a thing that's ever been fixed at production level. So you do have to take a little bit of time, ask your mech tech to look into it, and possibly even bring it to a potential repair and refit facility. So Argyle built a lot of Firestarter from the launch of the product, all the way until the Succession Wars, where their factory was unfortunately suffered a little accident involving nuclear weapons falling from orbit. It's an unfortunate thing that ends up happening to weapon facilities all over the inner sphere during the Succession War. It's unfortunate, I know. But obviously, Coventry Metalworks basically picked up the slack, bought the license to produce the mech, and kept producing it in massive amounts as Argyle decided not to repair. your factories. It was probably less of a decided not to repair and more of a, well, the insurance are not going to cover a full battlemech production facility. While in its role as a dedicated war crime platform, the Firestarter has, for the longest time now, been used primarily as a scout during the later part of the Succession War, because it was agile enough, it was armored enough, and it had the ability to set things on fire so people couldn't follow it. Honestly, this is a great mech to add to most scouting groups. You know, your scout group will normally have things like stingers, wasps, which are just as fast as the Firestarter. House Davion is going to use a bunch of Valkyries and a bunch of javelins in these roles as well. Same kind of speed as the Firestarter, so that works just fine. It's more mobile than your Steiner Commando because it's able to jump. So it's a very, very interesting platform to use as a scout mech because of these advantages. Of course, if you look at any clan scout forces, it's way too slow. Of course, the clan use clan space magic to make things work. The Firestarter just is not magical enough, let's say, to fit these roles. So just what did Argyle build originally? Well, the FS9A was the original model, but it was quickly replaced with the FS9H. Really, there isn't much of a difference between the two models, except for a very small change. Both of them are built around a quatuor of flamers, one in each arm, one in the center torso pointing forward, and one in the center torso pointing backwards. The backwards one, very, very important if you are to use the Firestarter as a scout mech, because that's the one you're going to be using to set things on fire behind you as you're running away from that nasty Orion and its long-range missiles. To complement this, you also have a pair of medium lasers, which you can also use to set things on fire, which is not the most powerful weapon setup on a 35-ton mech, but still, 2 medium lasers is decent enough and can be used as a very decent harassing weapon in many situations. Your A-series, like I said, is pretty rare. You might just run around and find one in a cache somewhere, or maybe someone has a legacy one. What it has is a pair of small lasers and a little bit thicker armor. Is it a good setup? Depending on the role you're wanting to use your Firestarter as, yes. But the H-series, in my opinion, is a little bit better when we look at its more dedicated role, as it replaces those small lasers with a pair of machine guns and an ammo. So that reminds infantry who's the actual boss when it comes to the battlefield. As we were saying, the Firestarter is rather mobile. It's built around a 210 Omni fusion power plant, like most battlemech, obviously. So it can comfortably run around 95 kilometers per hour, and you can keep a fairly steady gait while going at that kind of speed. Unfortunately, this is more or less a proprietary part for the Firestarter, so you do need to be careful when ordering spares for that 210 engine. If you're getting something that's a 210 fusion power plant but from another manufacturer, you might have to play around to make it fit, basically. You get a full set of jump jets, so you can jump 180 meters with ease, which is perfectly fine, especially when you're trying to run away from the fires you've actually set. To make sure things are actually a little bit easier, you get a Coventry Cyclops 14 communication system, which is also mounted in commandos. So this is a easy to get part because there's, quite a few commandos floating around, and it's not a proprietary part. You're going to be able to find it on the open market or on the black market fairly easily. The important thing is to keep sure that you're friends with Coventry Metal Works if you're going to be using Firestarters in a large quantity, because they're the ones who make the majority of the spare parts for it. Just keep a good tab with them, make sure you pay your bills, and you should be fine. I do believe the Firestarter has lost some of its luster recently because it's an unfortunate casualty of modernity in the battlefield. Modern battlefields have incredible cooling abilities with the double heat sink being almost prevalent on almost all mechs, or you would have those fancy cooling pods that some people use to make sure that their mechs don't explode due to the heat. So the Firestarter role as a fighting mech is not as great here. The advantage was, during the Succession War, battlemechs didn't just run hot. They were most of the time burning people alive. I mean, you start shooting 2 PPCs in your Warhammer and you start feeling the heat really damn quickly. The best thing a Firestarter could do in a fight was basically introduce those mechs with even higher temperature from 3 flamers. And the enemy pilot had to stop shooting, had to start maneuvering a whole lot to try to get their heat down. So it was a lot of fun. Thankfully for Firestarters, however, forests, buildings, rioters, those don't have heat sinks. Those still burn really well when you shoot a stream of plasma on them. As with most mechs, obviously there's a few different variants and configurations you're gonna see for the Firestarter. Argyle did build the Mirage version of the Firestarter for a whole year in order to make it more of a frontline mech. Took off most of the flamers, replaced them with small lasers and more armor. Honestly, there weren't that many that were built. A lot of them were used by one specialty unit, and it basically ruins a good thing by trying to make the Firestarter something that it isn't. 35-ton trooper mechs already exist. There's quite a few of them, and a lot of them are actually easy enough to purchase. So even if Argyle's factories had not been nuked from orbit, along with the rest of the planet of Sky in 2893, pretty sure the Mirage would not have lasted. You also have a weird red-headed stepchild in the Firestarter family. The Firestarter K is defined as an heavy skirmisher. I might have seen a few of those going through the factory here, and it's equipped with a pair of flamers, a pair of small lasers, and a large laser. Argyle basically didn't want to change their production line, so they decided to have a Firestarter to serve as a support for the other Firestarters by having like some long-range capabilities on it. This really didn't catch on all that well, but you are going to see a few of them pop up, and it's going to surprise you as a Merc commander when you see a Firestarter starting to pop some large laser shots from down the field. As the 3050s rolled around and the Elm Data Core was getting spread out and nice, our friends at the New Avalon Institute of Science basically managed to figure out how things work again. Federated Suns kind of gave some details on how to improve Firestarter. The idea originally was to make the Firestarter a better scout, while also making sure that it keeps its incendiary role. The first thing they did was to change the chassis to make it out of endosteel. This is lighter, takes up more room, but on a light mech, normally it's not catastrophic. Didn't really change much of the weaponry. Still has 4 flamers to 2 medium lasers. Put back a small laser in. You got an anti-missile system, with some ammo for it, obviously, and a Beagle active probe, which will help you when you're actually scouting ahead. There's a few that were actually equipped with a Guardian ECM instead, probably one of those parts that you can auto swap in and out as a technician if you've got enough time and a little bit of patience. There's also a final version of the S-Series that we are talking about here, where they change the lasers to ER medium lasers. Actually stick some double heat sinks on it and get some light ferrofibrous to improve armor protection by, a tiny amount. In my opinion, this is a great setup. It keeps the basic Firestarter flavor. It makes it better at what it actually does, even better at what its intended role nowadays, which is being a scout, actually is. During the telecom company's Ollie Civil War, the Blakists also decided that they needed to commit a whole lot more war crimes, so they wanted to have their own Firestarter variant. They built a thing called the BSeries with light ferrofibrous armor, endosteel light engine, as much fancy Blakist technology that they could stick on it on top of a C3I computer. It could jump 240 meters using the really fancy jump jets on top of it, but the pilots kinda didn't like being in it because you ended up cooking yourself because they still only used basic heat sinks. Not sure if that was a great idea, and the price tag on those things is extraordinary. And then you also need to be able to, find one that wasn't destroyed at the end of the jihad. The most recent version of the Firestarter is the NSeries, dubbed the Mirage 2, and it has Defiance and Coventry currently fighting a bunch of custody battles for the model. While it's not a clan mech, it uses as much clan technology as you can get into it due to the deals that our friends at Defiance has and the technology that they've been able to imitate. Got a pair of Clan ER medium lasers and a pair of Clan ER small lasers, which are really good. A fancy XL engine, which is still big, but not as big as the regular one. And a plasma cannon, which is the clan version of a very long-range flamer. I do find it weird that it uses regular inner sphere flamers in its arm, but the endocomposite skeleton and reflective armor also are from locally sourced material. Defiance is likely to be selling a huge amount of these all around the place, especially if they don't care who they sell it to. I'm pretty sure the new ilClan will be more than happy to buy some riot control equipment off of them. But even if I was saying that this was as clan as can get, well, there's actually something that's even more clan-like in the Firestarter series, which is the OSeries, or the Firestarter Omni. Not a huge fan of the name. They could have gone with something a little bit different. Basically, the whole thing started when Coventry tried to bribe Lucian Armor Works to be part of their let's try to build Omnimechs in the inner sphere kind of deal. And Lucian Armor Work did kind of fuck them over back. What they basically told them was to just, build a Firestarter a little bit heavier and we'll tell you how to make pods for it. So we've got the Omnistarter that's a 45-ton mech rather than 35 tons. It's as fast as nimble as its smaller cousin, but that requires a much larger engine, unfortunately. And every single configuration is going to have 2 flamers hard mounted on it, so it keeps that Firestarter kind of feel to it. But you still have 13 tons of bud space, which is very decent once you start thinking about it. So you can design around what you want those 13 tons to be. The primary configuration for the Omnistarter is basically a fancy Firestarter to support other Firestarters. A little bit like the K series, it features 2 large lasers and 2 extra flamers. So you're going to have some extra crispy rioters at the end of the day, and those large lasers are going to be able to make sure things are not going to bug you. It has a Beagle active probe, which you can easily odd swap for a Guardian ECM, and in this case, since it's a pod, well, you only have to unplug it and plug it back in, so you don't have to actually fight with rewiring the whole thing. Saves you a lot of work. In the end, it's still a Firestarter, it's still bigger, it shoots further, and I honestly don't think it's worth paying triple the price to get one. I'm gonna go on a short tangent here and really go talk about the Omnimech in the inner sphere for a little bit. The experiment was great on papers. I know some military commanders and a lot of technicians really like Omnimechs better because of how easy they are to fix and modify. But with how big the industrial base in the inner sphere is, with how many factories we have and how many are, decentralized, let's say, there's not really a need for Omnimechs to be used in major forces. Dedicated platforms with pilots that are specialized in it is usually going to be a better deal. Mercs see the word Omnimech and they really start to jumping and really happy about it until they realize just how freaking expensive they are to maintain and to keep fielded. There's a few good inner sphere Omnimechs out there. Obviously, the Avatar, the Sunder. I do kind of like the Strider, but the Cicada does the same thing at the same for much cheaper, actually. I would really say most of those inner sphere Omnimechs are weird oddities which you can easily replace with standard mechs without the grift and the graft of the military industrial complex trying to sell you the newest and nicest thing that you can't really afford because you get into one too many fights and the parts just start being extraordinarily expensive. We're going to finish this by thinking a few other things here. Is there another incendiary mech? No. If that's what you need, just buy a Firestarter. If you want to get a medium trooper mech, you're going to have a dozen different options. You want to have a heavy fire support mech, you've got half a dozen options that are easy to get for just about anyone. Think about it. I want to get an incendiary mech. You get a Firestarter. There's not really any other mech you can get. It does that job really, really well. It can also be used as a scout in a very decent way. It can be used as a spotter, as an harasser. It can do just enough things to keep it interesting, basically. It's also a wonderful reminder to infantry that battlemechs are dangerous even to them, because every once in a while you get some people who think infantry and vehicles are the kings of the battlefield until a mech equipped to take care of them takes care of them. So I thank you very much for going through this lecture with me. I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.